Arizona law requires the seller to disclose material, important facts about the property, even if you are not asked by the buyer or a real estate agent. By law, sellers are not obligated to disclose that the property is or has been 1. A site of a natural death, suicide, homicide, or any other crime classified as a felony. 2. Owned or occupied by a person exposed to HIV, or diagnosed as having AIDS or any other disease not known to be transmitted through common occupancy of real estate, or 3. Located in the vicinity of a sex offender. However, the law does not protect a seller who makes an intentional misrepresentation. For example, if you are asked whether there has been a death on the property, and you know that there was such a death, you should not answer no, or I don't know. Instead, you should either answer truthfully, or respond that you are not legally required to answer the question. Latent material defects. Often, sellers and their listing agents are faced with a question. Is something in, on, or around the property a latent and/or material defect? What is the difference between a latent defect and a material fact? Who must disclose what? A seller is required to disclose the existence of known latent defects. Latent defects are defined as material defects in real property or an improvement to real property that a buyer would not reasonably be expected to ascertain or observe by a careful visual inspection of the property, and b. would pose a direct threat to the health or safety of the buyer or an invitee or occupant of the buyer. A real estate licensee in Arizona is required to disclose material facts the licensee knew or should have known that relate to the property. A material fact is defined as anything that would affect 1. The value of the property, or 2. A buyer-tenant's decision to purchase, lease the property, or how much to offer to purchase or lease the property. A real estate licensee may be held accountable if he knew or should have known of a condition and failed to disclose it. With regard to material facts, they may be included as an attachment to the disclosure and disclaimer statement. We highly recommend that you disclose any material facts in writing. When you disclose, you put the buyer on notice to make a further investigation. You also minimize your own liability and that of your seller. While there is a difference between material and latent, it is a distinction without a difference. That is because either one must be disclosed. While all latent defects are probably material, not all material defects are latent. The definition of material is a fact or a defect that, when fully considered, might impact the other party's decision to proceed or at what price. For example, the fact that the roof leaks during a rainstorm could be material to any buyer. That defect might be latent if there is no evidence that the roof leaks. The definition of a latent defect is one that is not readily apparent. An example might be: the roof leak might be both materials, since it might affect the buyer's decision to buy or how much to pay, while it also might be latent since there is no physical evidence of the roof leak. Standing in the property on a bright and sunny morning might not show evidence of a roof leak. But if the seller has experienced the leak and has repaired the damage that was done, but not the cause, the seller is clearly obligated to disclose this defect. Consider something that is widely known within the community, such as an HOA issue, but would not be readily apparent to a visitor to the community, such as a buyer and their agent. Such an issue might be a pending rate increase, or one-time assessment, or a rule change that has residents arguing about. Now, a seller wishes to sell this property and needs to decide how this HOA issue will be disclosed. There are many ways with which to make the disclosure. Indicate the issue on the HOA addendum that the seller completes as part of the listing process. Reflect the issue on the SPDS that is completed during the listing process. Provide documents from the HOA in the MLS that clearly identify the issue. A seller would be obligated to disclose the HOA issue as a potential material fact and possibly a latent defect. The AAR residential real estate purchase contract contained numerous warranties, including the seller's warranty that, at the earlier of possession or close of escrow, all heating, cooling, plumbing, electrical or mechanical systems, built-in appliances, along with the pool pump, filter, and heater, if any, shall be in working condition. During those same 4 decades, the real estate industry could not agree on the real, bottom-line definition of working condition. Over and above that concern, we also had trouble agreeing what parts of what system were warranted by the seller. Is working condition defined by one of the below? As the manufacturer designed, built, and/or installed the item, to standards of functionality that shows it is working, albeit not in perfect condition. It might have some rust, dents, stains, etc. While it has some minor flaws, it still works. For example, the kitchen sink faucet still works, has a few scratches, and drips 3 or 4 times after the faucet is turned off. Once we have a seller and listing agent make the decision as to which definition is used, we often see a buyer and their agent use a different definition. Then an inspector writes a report using either one of the above definitions, yet added another variation. For example, the inspector might say the AC compressor works, albeit not at 100%, has some signs of repair and deferred maintenance, has some rust and dents. Then, inspectors were often inclined to add, the AC compressor is reaching the end of its useful life. That inspection with those comments often created a dialogue between the parties identifying the difference between what the seller warranted, working condition, and what the buyer expected. That often resulted in a disagreement between the parties. February 2017, AAR released the revised Residential Resale Real Estate Purchase Contract and removed the seller warranties for condition. The language now reads, buyer and seller agree the premises are being sold in its present physical condition as of the date of contract acceptance. In most typical real estate purchase contracts, as well as in the AAR standard purchase contract, the seller would be obligated to disclose any known facts to a buyer. While that language might appear to create an as-is agreement, there is a difference in this language with typical as-is language. That is because the AAR contract goes further and identifies seller warranties that still exist. For example, the seller warrants that the property will be in materially the same condition at closing as it was at the time of contract acceptance. All personal property not included in the sale and all debris will be removed from the premises. Any seller of real property has contractual obligations to make certain disclosures. In both contract law and case law, we find time and again that the courts have ruled that a seller must disclose any and all known material and/or latent facts or defects. In the AAR residential purchase contract, it clearly shows the seller warranties, which now includes the following. Seller warrants that seller has disclosed to buyer and brokers all material latent defects and any information concerning the premises known to the seller. Prior to close of escrow, the seller warrants that payment in full will have been made for all labor, professional services, materials, machinery, fixtures, or tools furnished within the 150 days immediately preceding the close of escrow in connection with the construction, alteration, or repair of any structure nor improvement to the premises. Seller warrants that the information regarding connection to sewer system or on-site wastewater treatment facility, conventional septic or alternative, is correct to the best of the seller's knowledge. Note that the seller is not obligated to pay or offer a co-broke to the buyer's agent. Buyer must request this with the seller compensation addendum and attach it to the contract offer. It is all negotiable.